So I thought I'd talk about my experience making, writing, drawing a graphic novel, and then self-publishing afterwards. And I talk about what worked for me, what didn't work, and maybe what I would do differently. Um, so I have kind of maybe a more unique story, just because this is my first one. So maybe this isn't best like general advice type thing, but I got my idea for this story just from a short story I had been working on. At a certain point, I realized that I had so many images that I could kind of tell the story in a way with just the drawings I was making. And the short story was kind of long though, and it was a really complicated story, and I maybe was a bit in over my head, but I kind of kept going with it, taking a lot of breaks. And stuff like that. But it took me a few years, or no, like maybe 1 or 2 years of on and off working on it before I finished it. But it was a really cool experience, and I'm really happy that I went through with it despite my lack of experience drawing and doing any visual art. Because I only started doing those images for the short story. I was only gonna do one or two, and I got a little bit maybe arrogant, and thought that the drawing was good, and I thought I could go through with it. So I did, and it was mainly because I just thought there was a lot of things in the story that were like really visual, and it was a story about like a girl in a spaceship, and I won't spoil the whole thing, but eventually I had the whole book done, and I'd scanned all the images into my computer, and I went over them with drawing software and I think it's called a Wacom pad and pen. I didn't have that much skill drawing or anything, and in a way I kind of purposefully left a lot of the illustrations in the book kind of rough, because I thought I think it adds the effect of the story, because it's kind of a creepy story. It's kind of it's supposed to be like unsettling. It's not supposed to be a very comfortable story, and in a way I hope that like the art style of it reflects that kind of aspect of the story. And maybe all of that is just a cop out for me being bad at drawing, and and just doing this whole project anyways, which is probably more true. But so I kind of was going on with this kind of like anti-perfectionist kind of style, where I was just trying to get the rough idea across with how I drew the whole thing. And in that way, it almost just looks like a storyboard, or like like the first rough draft that would go to like a comic, and then maybe some other people would go and go over it and make the images look a lot better and stuff. But I was doing this whole thing by myself, and when I went online to try to find people to work with, and work with me to make the comic look better, or maybe like more realistic or something, I didn't have the money for what people wanted. Like it's a really expensive service to get somebody to draw your comic for you. It's, from what I saw, it's like, I don't know, I don't remember exactly the prices, but it was nothing that I could afford. And so I didn't want to give up because of that either. I kind of just wanted to make it happen. And I understand that I could take more time to find somebody, or maybe just save up the money, because like maybe that's the mentality, that it should be worth it to put that much money down and save it. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right, or whatever. But I didn't, I just didn't have the money that would be needed to pay a illustrator to make the whole story. So I just decided to do it myself. And after a few of my friends read it and told me they understood the story and things like that, I finalized the whole thing. I made a cover for it. I wrote like a summary and stuff like that, and I kind of packed it all into like a manuscript file, and sent it to a bunch of graphic novel publishers. And I heard back from a lot of them like pretty quick, which was cool. I thought it would take like years, I know from like writing fiction and trying to get that published, a lot of publishers will tell you like to, you know, wait like half a year or a few months to hear back from them, which is pretty understandable. It makes sense, especially for fiction, fiction writing. I mean, but it seems like the comic book publishers get back to you really quick. I did like a search for any publishers accepting, you know, unsolicited manuscripts, you know, in 2022 or whatever, and I found a bunch of them, and I emailed all of them with kind of a cover page in the email and the manuscript itself, and explaining what the story is and why I thought it fit into their publication. And I sent out, you know, a bunch of emails like that with the files, and I heard back from them, and a lot of them really liked it, but most of them just didn't like the art style, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I don't think it really fit in with most of the publishers. And I kind of, even though I kind of anticipated from the beginning that I would self-publish it, I kind of just submitted all of that just to see if, you know, it would work out. And I definitely get it. I mean, it was my first comic, and it doesn't look beautiful or anything. It doesn't look amazing. It's really bare bones, and like, it's, you know, it's like my first attempt. Maybe it's the kind of thing that a healthier minded person would just, you know, shelve after they make it, and then maybe try to publish their second attempt, because sometimes like that's the way to go. Sometimes like your first try at something isn't as good as your second, and maybe if the next comic or graphic novel I make is going to look a lot better, and maybe publishers will be more into it. But you know, I didn't want to just get rid of it, so I decided to you know, self-publish it through KDP, which is a pretty popular option. And I think that worked out pretty cool. I liked, you know, getting all these books printed out and seeing how they turned out, and reading the story in like an actual bound book, and seeing the cover I made and everything like that. It was really fun to, you know, give the story to friends and family, and see people, you know, calling me and telling me they like the story and stuff. And that made like the entire experience like worth it. But I mean, in retrospect, I don't think I would self-publish a book like that again, just because I mean, it's cool to do, to kind of test out what a book would look like if you printed it, and try to get a feel for like that world of like, you know, making and selling books. I think it's like a good experience to learn about why people self-publish, or why people use traditional publishers. And you know, I think I definitely learned why people self-publish, and because you know, it's just a really quick, easy thing that you can do like any day. You just have to finish your manuscript or your book, and submit it to KDP, and you know, soon enough you can have it printed and online, and you can have it on Kindles and everything. So you know, it's like a really easy kind of system to use. But I think if I was to do another book, I would definitely do traditional publishing if I could make it happen. I mean, if I had another like story I made that nobody wanted to print, I suppose I would just print it on my own. But I think in the end it would have been a lot better if I could find publishing for my book, just because, you know, making the whole thing on your own and trying to promote it on your own, and you know, doing the whole thing where you take your book to bookstores by yourself, and put it on their shelves and stuff like that, which I did. You know, I went and signed contracts with a couple bookstores, and you know, they would take in like 6 books or so, and put it on their shelf. I just think it turns into like, I mean, I guess if you did that full time, maybe it's possible. But I remember one of the days I was at the bookstore bringing books in for them to sell, I overheard somebody walking around with their friend in the bookstore, and they said to their friend, like, I'm scared of reading a self-published book. And I thought that was really funny, and I totally get it. I don't even think I would ever like read like a unsolicited like self-published book. I don't think it would make sense, especially because like, who has the time for that? But So for that reason, I think it would, for that reason and a few others, like I think I would go for traditional publishing just because I think it would just feel like more of an achievement, and they would take care of publish promoting and shipping the book out to stores and making contracts like that, I'm sure. And it would just be a much more like kind of exciting achievement, I think. And I think that would make the whole thing a lot more worth it. A lot of the publishers that looked over my manuscript and turned it down, they kind of told me that like they believed that there was someone that would publish it if I just kept sending it out. And maybe that's the key. Maybe you should just send it out to all the publishers, and even if it's a really small publisher that's not going to give you a lot of royalties, like maybe that's still better than just self-publishing and trying to tackle the whole promotion thing and everything on your own. Because you can only get so far, like promoting something on Instagram or Twitter or like Wattpad or something. You just, I know it works out for a lot of people, and maybe this sounds like pessimistic, but it's just, I guess, how I feel. Maybe I'm saying this just for myself, that I think I would prefer to like avoid self-publishing in the future, just because I guess that's why they used to call it the vanity press, right? Or I think that's what they called it, like, because it can be considered kind of vain to just write a whole book and then do the whole thing and print it out and then insist that it's great to everybody. It becomes a lot of work trying to convince everybody that it's good enough to read, because if something's published by a traditional publisher, it's kind of like it's vetted. It's vetted as a good story that I think it makes people a lot more comfortable with reading it, and it makes people think like, because you need that line when anybody buys anything, that like it needs to get recommended to them first. Usually they need to have some type of way that it's been like someone says it's good, at least. Like nobody wants to be the first person to read something. Usually somebody wants to know that like their friend liked the story, or at least somebody liked the story, so that they know they're not going to waste their time with it. Sure, some people like to just read a bad story or would just read anything, and some people are just really fast readers, and that's just how it is. But at a certain point, you really do need someone behind you as a writer, or a comic book writer, or any kind of like creative, really, to be behind you doing that whole promotion part and that whole thing, at least in my opinion, just because I think it clouds up your head to be worried about promotion and making advertisements and all this kind of stuff. Just, it's better if you can focus on making the book and sending it out to people, and I think that's a good enough effort. And but anyways, I'm happy that I did the whole project anyways, and I'm happy with how it turned out, self-published. It was cool to send to people. It made it really fast, and I don't even think this book would have been printed otherwise. There's a chance, and maybe that's for the best, but since it was my first thing, I felt kind of proud, and I'm happy I went through with it. And yeah, so that pretty much sums up my experience after I self-published. I just printed out a lot of them. I kept a lot with me. I give them as gifts to a lot of people I meet. Whenever anybody asks about whatever writing I'm doing, I have some copies that I hand out, and they're pretty cheap to print with KDP. They only want like $5 to $10 per copy, and it's not like the best books or anything. It's not really like the most beautiful bound thing ever, but they do the job, and it was a cool experience.